Boa noite a todos e todas. É com alegria que a gente abre aqui essa palestra, dando continuidade ao nosso workshop. A gente está fazendo um trabalho desde ontem, para quem não sabe, um workshop sobre infraestrutura, cidade e mudança climática. É parte do nosso grupo de pesquisa. O projeto é liderado pelo professor Renato Anelli, professora que envolve eu, como professora do programa de pós-graduação, professora Ana Paula, que é professora aqui da faculdade e professora da Universidade de São Judas Tadeu, e colegas da Universidade Federal do ABC, da Universidade do Instituto de Arquitetura e Urbanismo de São Carlos, e da USP, IGG, IAG e o FRN. Então, é um projeto que envolve uma rede de pesquisadores e temos aqui a honra de receber o professor Aksel Ersoy. A Ana Paula logo vai apresentá-lo, mas eu acho que a gente tem que aqui agradecer a presença do professor, porque ele está trazendo uma contribuição bastante significativa do trabalho que eles fazem na Universidade de Delft, na Faculdade de Arquitetura da Universidade de Delft, na Holanda, e que é uma referência para todos nós. Então, para os alunos que estão aqui assistindo pela primeira vez, eu sei que tem alunos da primeira etapa, nós temos aqui um programa de intercâmbio bastante intenso com diversas universidades do exterior, e Delft é uma das principais parceiras. Então, acho que isso é uma coisa que vocês podem deixar aí no radar, em breve, lá pela quinta, sexta etapa do curso, pensar em fazer um intercâmbio. Então, é a partir de ouvir palestras e fazer essa interlocução com as pesquisas, grupos de pesquisas, que também vocês abrem essa possibilidade. E para quem, uma propaganda, porque amanhã vocês não vão ter aula, amanhã, infelizmente, não tem aula, as aulas vão ser online, mas teremos a palestra do professor André Neri aqui, então, para quem puder vir até aqui, neste mesmo horário, assistir a palestra do professor André Neri, ou no link que nós podemos passar daqui a pouco também a palestra do professor André Neri para quem está aqui assistindo. Tá bom? Então, muito obrigada mais uma vez por sua presença, e vou passar a palavra aqui para a Ana Paula, que vai conduzir essa mesa, e eu vou assistir do lugar que eu...
Obrigada, Angélica, obrigada a todos. Bom, boa noite a todos, muito obrigada pela presença, queria agradecer enormemente. Thank you, Aksel, to accept our invitation. You are very welcome here to Mackenzie University. I'm very glad to have your presentation here. We had a collaboration in the past, and I hope it will be a successful proposal in the future. And Aksel Aksel Ersoy had an important work reference for us in terms of real-world labs. He works as an assistant professor of urban development management at Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. He is interested in understanding the complex relationships between the social and economic transformation taking place in cities and the ways digital technology can be used for inclusive, prosperous, and sustainable societies. He is an affiliate of the Amsterdam Institute for Advanced Metropolitan Solutions, AMS Institute, where he cooperates with colleagues on urban living labs. He is also affiliated with the Leiden Delft Erasmus Center and work as an editorial board member of Planning Practice and Research, Digital Geography and Society, and DISP, the Planning Review Journals. It's a great pleasure to have you here, and thank you very much to accept our invitation.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. So it's a great honor to be here and meeting all of you in person. This is my first time in Sao Paulo, and it's such a great opportunity also for me to see the city and also see Mackenzie University and also meet your colleagues, professors here. So I'm very happy to be here. And so I'm gonna, yeah. Yes, okay. Okay, so like Anna mentioned, I work as an assistant professor in urban development management at Delft University of Technology. And there my research has been predominantly on urban infrastructure, urban environment, and future cities. I have been there for 5 years now. My background is urban planning. I studied urban planning degrees in different countries. And for the last 5 years now, I'm working at Delft University of Technology. So today, what I would like to discuss and explain you is this concept of urban living labs, because maybe some of you are already familiar with this concept. You heard about this thing, this concept. Maybe you have come across also Anna's work on real-world experiments, real-world laboratories. So there are some overlaps also between her research and also this urban living lab concept. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about this urban living lab concept and also the way this concept is especially being used as part of climate responsive cities. So how it has become very popular and some of the key indicators and also concepts associated with the climate responsive cities. Yes. So to start with, maybe it's better to say a few things about the motivation, our motivation, and also the problem statement about urban living labs and also climate responsive cities. So here, what we see is that, especially recently, more and more many policies, programs, and also projects of governmental and also non-governmental organizations, they are striving for addressing issues in relation to climate change. And also, of course, associated problems and complexities and uncertainties of climate change. So as part of these discussions, what we see is that a series of terminologies, let's say, they have been coined to be used in cities, and they include things like, for example, resilient city, sponge city, sustainable city, all these concepts, all these different, for example, discourses, they have been used for cities. And what we see amongst these discussions is that more and more these kind of more contemporary approaches, they are being used increasingly to adapt and respond to these kind of complex problems that we see in our cities, especially in relation to, let's say, climate change, population increase, and then some of the maybe problems with our demographic characteristics of the cities. And in relation to that, what we see is that this adoption or the adoption of the built environment, it has been used more and more and we start thinking more and more about, how we can, let's say, implement adoption in the context of individuals, organizations, and also in the same, in our case, cities, and also for the future cities. And again, maybe some of you have already read some papers about urban experiments and this kind of concept of new urban experiments in cities. And the reason why I put this slide is that because, as we know, right now, for example, urban areas, especially cities, they are now regarded as vital, basically, part of the global responses to climate change. And at the same time, we do know that cities are the main contributors to global house emissions. So in that case, it is actually very important for us to understand a kind of fuller understanding of the urban responses to climate change, because this will kind of give us a better overview of how we can understand a kind of more geographically, let's say, diverse range of cities and the way they work, especially in the context of climate change experiments. And here, what I have provided some references for you, and I think these slides are also, they will be available later on if you are interested. And one of the things that we see in the discussions is that more and more this kind of concept of climate change experiment is being used, and it's based on insights that are coming from basically a series of literatures that are based on governance experiments, for example, the role of niches, grassroots organizations, and they all point basically to the way in which experimentation can be used as part of a new governance structures and also as part of socio-technical transition. Of course, one of the key references here, Bulkley and also Castan-Proata and Evans, for example, the way they, for example, explain this kind of urban experiment or climate change experiment, they identify this as part of these three indicators, and they explain it in a way that, for example, they can be interventions for, more kind of strategic interventions. They can be, for example, some experiments where the purpose is only to reduce emission of greenhouse gases, or they can be experiments where we see the urban, when it's delivered by or in the name of an existing or imagined urban community. So they kind of identify these three different indicators as part of the explanation. And what is interesting, of course, with the concept of urban experiments is, and also this kind of new ideas, emerging new ideas, with the emergence of these kind of new experiments, more and more what we see is that a series of different disciplines start to come together, and also they start to collaborate. For example, what we see is that, because I'm in the, let's say, department of the built environment, for example, in the department of built environment, we see more architects are, for example, working with urban planners and also landscape designers, for example, biologists, and also maybe climate engineers to kind of cultivate new kind of urban natures. So we are trying to, for example, identify new ways of knowledge by bringing in nature, agriculture, architecture, and technology. And we start thinking about how these kind of different disciplines, for example, can coexist or cooperate together. And in this case, for example, there are so many examples, but I put this as one of the examples, and this is one of it's the Military Housing Foundation in Madrid. It's a project designed by the architect is by Fernando Higares and Antonio Miro, So what you see, for example, in this example, is that the plants, for example, on the building, they kind of form some sort of like a privacy screen, but also at the same time, they are helping the owners, for example, the occupants of this building, for example, they are protecting them from the noise that's coming from the street, but also at the same time, they are providing some sort of like a cooling mechanism for buildings or for the built environment. So it's just one of the examples where we see different kinds of collaborations can be used in the context of urban built environment. But of course, when we think about these new experiments, what we also see that they come with different institutional arrangements. So all the kind of collaboration and cooperation that we refer to, they also enable us to think about how alternative spaces can be created and how we can think about maybe more open, transparent platforms that will really bring up, for example, academics, practitioners, and also policymakers, and also different stakeholders, for example, from different backgrounds. So this kind of, arrangements, new arrangements, I think is important, especially for us, people coming from the social sciences, I guess, and also other disciplines, because especially when we think about climate change or things around global environmental change, this kind of interdisciplinary working or interdisciplinary collaboration, they become more and more important for us to kind of think about. Because as it has been argued also in the literature, this kind of new ways of thinking, it has been argued that they can produce new frameworks, really kind of combining different intersections between different levels, different mechanisms, and also can provide some sort of a bridge between knowledge, practice, and science. So in that context, what we see is this one of the things, and it is becoming quite an interesting discussion in Europe and also in Latin America, is this concept of living labs. Because with the especially increasing complexities and also societal challenges that are brought by, again, climate change, mobility, air pollution, what we call these kind of wicked problems. This is the kind of societal challenges for our cities. Cities, in a way, they have become these kind of places for experimentation. They are the places actually for problems, but at the same time, they are also the places for solutions when we think about it. And we can, in these places, we can think about, for example, a series of innovations and also maybe practices that can be emerged to respond to maybe some of the sustainability challenges of our cities, and especially when we think about future cities. And urban living labs, in a way, they actually are at the heart of these discussions because for us, they really provide some sort of like a forum for innovation, development of new products, for example, services, and also it really enables us to kind of think about these co-creation, co-production, for example, how to kind of incorporate citizens and how to incorporate, for example, users also as part of the decision-making process. So they really act as vehicles, for example, tools for exploring the kind of changing dynamics of urban challenges in which also experimentation can be used to inform urban practice. So, like I said, they are used basically as forms of urban experimentation that promote sustainability practices, sustainability transitions. They offer innovation, for example. They offer opportunities to foster innovation also at the same time via testing and learning in, for example, real life settings. And they provide also settings for applying the development of new products and services. There are different, nowadays there are different also definitions that you can also find on living labs, also European network of living labs. And maybe one of the most common ones is, defined by urban European network of living labs is this kind of, they are defined as this user-centric open innovation ecosystems based on users, co-creation, for example, and also applying these ideas in a real life setting, so real life context. And like I said, there are different characteristics of urban living labs. You can actually find in the internet, if you are interested, a series of also guidelines, also even some tools, for you to kind of use how to start a living lab. But I think one of the key things about this concept is that they really create this kind of co-creative environment in which a series of different stakeholders can participate in. They test new ideas, and they really kind of encourage people to participate and have ownership of the project. So it's really kind of enabling more participation, basically. And I just wanted to here, for example, highlight also some of the key characteristics of these labs, as that they really kind of aim at innovation. They put, for example, urban sustainability as one of the key important, for example, elements as part of their ideas. Learning is, of course, one of their kind of main aims and objectives, and how learning takes place, for example, in different settings, and of course in the real life settings. And it's basically increasingly also emphasizing this importance of co-creation or co-production, which actually is being used nowadays in replacement of participation. So co-creation and co-production, these concepts are being used basically to invite participants, stakeholders as part of the process and making decisions collaboratively. But you will see these concepts more and more in the literature, because they have become, especially recently, very, very popular. And it's an iterative process, which means that, it's not like a linear process. So if there are, for example, issues in the process, it's always kind of open in terms of having more discussions, and it invites a series of different partners from public and private institutes, but also universities and community organizations. One of the I think also interesting things about urban living labs is that so in my presentation also, I forgot to mention in my presentation, I'm going to make it more concrete. I will give you 2 examples from the Netherlands and 2 urban living lab examples basically from the Netherlands. And especially we will, in those 2 examples, I will explain how learning can be, how we looked into learning and how we can apply learning, for example, in in different settings. So what we actually learned from those two examples. So going back to this slide, about urban living labs, I think one of the important things about these kind of living labs or urban living labs that, this open innovation concept is also it's being used more and more. And what we see is that, especially with the increasing awareness of the problems with the kind of, especially the traditional model of innovation or the kind of linear way of, learning and innovation, it is kind of new paradigm of open innovation has been, introduced, which aims to kind of connect both internal and external information and aim to kind of create some sort of like an ecosystem. And here, as part of open innovation discussions, what we see in the literature, we see this kind of concept of triple helix concept, where we see, for example, public institutions and private institutions and universities, working together, for example, to create a set of new knowledges. And following this triple helix concept, then there's this kind of quadruple helix concept, where we also have civil society organizations as part of the knowledge creation. And in that concept, or in that respect, referring to the triple helix and also quadruple helix, actually urban living labs, in a way, they also aim to enhance this kind of open innovation and learning. And it really kind of emphasizes the idea of what works and what doesn't work in the process. And they do this kind of, like I said, in a kind of interactive, iterative, and co-creative or participatory manner. And what you can see also in terms of these different examples, what you can do, for example, you can use this living lab or urban living lab concept in different settings. You can, for example, think about living lab as a kind of single innovation where you want to test one idea. For example, it can be in the context of here, a healthcare innovation that you want to, for example, test your idea or the methodology in the context of, for example, a living and care lab. Or it can be something a bit more complex, where you see these kind of multiple innovations and also multiple problems in a more geographically diverse area or in a geographically diverse neighborhood, where we see also this, as it has been referred as urban living lab, for example. And in my case, I will talk about this urban living lab in the context of Amsterdam, which is a city that I am more familiar with. So what we see as part of this kind of open innovation and learning and also urban living lab, what we wanted to create is this kind of new framework where we can explore the learning literature and also open innovation literature. So when you dig into this literature, you see these kind of three different learning loops, like the single loop learning, double loop learning, and triple loop learning. So if I just summarize what these things are, so that later on you have a better understanding of how we approach our cases. When we talk about single loop learning, what we see is, we really want to kind of look into, for example, how we want to operationalize urban living labs actually with, let's say, with their aims and objectives without really kind of providing guiding assumptions. With double loop learning, so you kind of go a little bit into more changing strategies and thinking about, what kind of strategies that can be used, for example, to change the frame of references and guiding assumptions. And with the triple loop learning, so you kind of go a little bit deeper and you really kind of want to, for example, operationalize the learning and innovation in a wider ecosystem. So the learning really kind of basically deepens when you move from single loop learning to triple loop learning. And in our cases also, we wanted to look at these different kinds of learning within urban living labs and what we can extract from these different examples. So as a case study area, what we studied was this area in the north part of Amsterdam. It's called Buiksloterham, so it's a bit like a long word. And the interesting thing about this area is that it is actually very close to Amsterdam train station. It's in the north part of the area, but the area has been actually really contaminated. So the area was really polluted because in the past it was used for shipbuilding. So the land was heavily contaminated. And the idea at that time, which is in after 1990s, was to think about, how to transform this area, how to make this area kind of, for something for like a success story. So people also can look into this and learn from these different ideas or experiments that they would like to establish in this area. So we chose our case study area in Buiksloterham, and we looked into 2 cases as part of this area and also as an example for Urban Living Lab. And then there, of course, there were different motivations. One of the things was at that time when we started looking into these examples, like I said, these examples, they happened in this old industrial waterfront area. It was a contaminated area. The municipality wanted to develop this area as part of kind of this residential office and also with an industry purpose still. And they wanted to do something different. So they, instead of transforming this area as a kind of typical residential area, they wanted to transform this area by using alternative methods. For example, how to kind of incorporate, let's say, circular economy, how to kind of incorporate, very high-tech technological solutions, how to kind of think about also water waste, for example, water management, new systems, water management. So the idea was really for people to think about what are the different ways of technologies they can implement, for example, in this area. So in Buiksloterham, so one of the cases which was quite interesting was this case study was called the Koury. And the Koury is a cafe there, but it also, the whole idea, basically this is the timeline of how the Koury, the cafe, was constructed and how it kind of improved in time. So starting from 2000, the idea was proposed, and then it attracted a lot of people, especially in the area, especially that are interested in clean tech solutions and thinking about how to incorporate different technologies to transform and to cleanse the earth, for example. And it became such a successful story in time that actually now it has been used in international cases as a Dutch design for example, for clean tech technologies, for the future of clean tech technologies, for example. And the second example, which was also quite interesting, it was this kind of scone skip case study. So these kind of things on the water. Basically, they are actually floating sustainable residential units, residential community units of 30 houses there. And the project was actually inspired by a pioneer living in a kind of sustainable houseboat and 2 entrepreneurs, individuals they started the development of a plan for sustainable floating community in 2008. And together with, one of the interesting thing about this also project is that together with future residents, so they look for a location, they proposed the plan, they took it to the municipality, with also later on help with the cuval, the cafe. They, for example, established this project where they have now 47 housing units, and the area now is also used as one of the very successful case study areas for circular, for example, use of the materials, and also minimum impact of the water consumption. So if I, for example, put both cases, maybe it's better to kind of look at this table, because it will maybe give us a better kind of overview of the ambitions of these two projects. So they really kind of aim at this kind of regenerative development of the area by using biodiversity, for example, using, for example, in most cases, do-it-yourself approaches, and also thinking about really kind of closed material circles, and different, for example, technologies that can make the place also affordable, but also sustainable, for example, for the future. And they both projects, they really had high targets for the future also. As you can see, for example, they aim at almost 100% of renewable electricity, and also in some cases, for example, renewable heat and hot water supply, and in some cases, really again, high ambitions and targets, reaching 80% of, for example, nutrient recovery, and also making the whole area very self-sustaining also. So thinking about also incorporating agriculture even in the development of the area. So I'm not gonna, go into too much details here, but what is key basically here to mention. So this is for the Cuval, and this is also for the Skånskip sustainable floating project. So what you see is this kind of single loop learning, double loop learning, and triple loop learning columns. So going back to our theoretical framework that I mentioned, like, those single loop, double loop, and triple loop learning, and how we can operationalize urban living labs. So what we can see is that when we especially analyze these two case studies, they show really the importance of actually the participation of knowledge institutions and experts for learning. For example, in this case, they collaborated with a lot with this kind of Amsterdam Metropolitan Solutions, AMS Institute, which is also an institute that I am a part of. And also we work, for example, consulted at some point. And these really experts and knowledge institutions, they act as kind of key actors, basically bringing in testable innovations and also funds, and even so ideas. They are often generated, even though ideas, for example, in some cases they were often generated by local communities. It was basically the expert and also knowledge institutions that really kind of triggered the development of these urban living labs. So maybe just trying to now take some lessons from these two case studies and think about how we can apply these also in different settings. What we see is that these living labs also, it is in these living labs, it is really important, actually essential, to harmonize the innovation process amongst stakeholders, basically, so that they can benefit from the project in different ways. And this can be seen, for example, in the case of how, let's say, companies can get new and innovative ideas. For example, how users can get the innovation they want, or in some cases, how researchers can acquire, for example, case studies, and how, for example, even public organizations can get increased return on their investment. So we can see this as part of kind of different components. And in that case, with the two examples, what we see is that, you know, these urban living labs, they can really provide an essential platform to connect various impacts, and especially in the context of climate change and also environmental sustainability indicators. And like I said, I mean, in both cases, both in the DeQual and also Schoonskip examples, what we see is that various knowledge institutes and also experts and consultants and also local water, for example, company, they help to disseminate lessons basically to other locations within Amsterdam and also beyond. And one of the also, I think, interesting thing is that the innovations have been actually directed at small scale developments, but even though they were kind of more small scale developments, because the projects were successful, they were able to think about how to kind of maybe scale up these kind of learning and ideas in different contexts. So maybe, you know, coming towards the end, so what we see is that I think more and more, and especially in Latin American context now, also this urban living lab is being used more and more, and they are attracting quite a lot of attention. But at the same time, we are also aware that maybe the task of theorizing, you know, the development of these urban living labs are still relatively maybe a bit embryonic, so it's still at the early stage. But this doesn't mean, of course, you know, we can think about how we can maybe, you know, abstract the meaning of urban living labs and also use it for sustainable urban development for future. And what is one of the things that is interesting actually also with the whole learning living lab, urban living lab process is that when we are comparing, you know, these the Koury and also Schoonskip examples, we see that actually the learning is quite interesting, because in most cases learning happened in local case study contexts. So in actually, as opposed to what policymakers think, that, you know, learning, you take the learning and apply it in another context. Learning in most of the case happened in a local setting, because I think more and more also people realize that the idea is only applicable in a particular local context because of the characteristics of that project. So maybe, you know, if you've last words about this thing, now that we especially we are aware that, you know, cities are facing declining public resources, and then they are trying to really kind of seek for alternative solutions to kind of minimize you know, economic impacts and also think about their savings. These kind of alternative approaches, they are becoming more and more important. And in that case, I do think that urban living labs, they kind of offer a kind of more bottom-up approach for us, and also alternative approaches for people to kind of participate also. And as technology advances, for example, and also new social actors emerge, we more and more, I think, move towards this kind of quadruple helix, open innovation ideas, where we try to kind of incorporate different stakeholders in the decision-making process and think about, how we can incorporate different actors as part of, as part of the solutions for problems associated with climate change. So thank you very much. And I don't know if I have gone too far or too detailed. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Aksel, for this great explanation for us. It's very important to have contact with this kind of methodology. And could you please clarify for us, because there is a lot of patterns of labs. There is urban living labs, real world labs, and there is another one I don't remember now, but what kind of differences we could stack on each methodology? It is very much difference between them. There is only details. I heard on literature that urban lived labs are more attached on technology solutions and real world lab more touched on governance. Is it okay? Is it a real discussion in the literature? Could you improve this discussion, please?
Thank you for the question. And I think it's a very important question because, to be honest, I mean, when I, for example, started my research on urban living labs, and then, of course, I read what has been written and real world labs. So I think there are a lot of overlap. So it's difficult to kind of have a clear cut between these two concepts. At the beginning, I also thought urban living lab is maybe used for more technological, for example, innovations, and maybe it is for more kind of a neighborhood scale projects. So maybe a bit more kind of, maybe there was something to do with this scale. But then when I looked into real world labs and, the cases, for example, they are also like that, a bit like that. And in urban living labs, even though the idea, for example, with these two projects, there are a lot of kind of ambitions towards, for example, circular economy, environmental sustainability, future cities. But actually, at the same time, there are also a lot of references to the governance structures, because these kind of, for example, engagement with civil society organizations or these kind of high-tech companies, they do kind of require some sort of like a new institutional arrangement. Because what we see with urban living labs is that a lot of ideas are being tested for the first time. So when you test an idea for the first time, you always hesitate. You don't want to take risk. So then what happens is that you go to the municipality and then you want to kind of get some sort of backup from the municipality. If the project doesn't work, would you kind of, back us up, some sort of, there's a risk maybe associated with it. So then, municipality becomes part of the process. So it really kind of brings in actually a new institutional rearrangement also within the idea. So I do think that these two concepts overlap a lot, but maybe in the future there will be a point that they will kind of have their own boundaries. But for me, there are a lot of overlaps, to be honest.
Agora é minha vez de dar o troco. Eu falo em português, alguém traduz para ele. Tô brincando. Alguém traduz, eu falo com calma. Não, não, é rica a experiência, né, do professor holandês. Sempre me chama a atenção esses países que têm o convívio com a cidade e a água. Então, acho que o professor teve na visita da parte da manhã, é muito comum em São Paulo, parte da região metropolitana, onde tem o rio e a cidade, a água é poluída. A capital paulista, ela eliminou boa parte de seus rios e córregos, canalizou, e as águas vêm dos municípios muito longínquos, como Vale do Ribeira, Cantareira e assim por diante. Então, a pergunta número 1 é, esses rios que nós vemos aí nas imagens, primeiro, qual a educação ambiental, coisa do tipo, para que faça que essa água seja limpa? Convívio da cidade com o rio. E essas águas, depois eu faço. E por último, se esses rios que o senhor mostrou aí na imagem urbana, se elas são potáveis, se são usadas para tratamento humano, né? Consumo humano.
Thank you for the question. And I think one of the things that can be taken from Urban Living Lab, and maybe if I want to apply it in the context of Sao Paulo and also the issues around water, is that these kind of living labs, they provide a platform for people to become more aware of things. So with the water problem, for example, the places we visited today in the morning and in the afternoon. So one of the key challenges is that the problem doesn't only occur in that particular area. So we need to think beyond that particular geographical area. So we really need to think about also, what can be done, outside that creek, for example, outside the border of that area, because when we think about, let's say, the slope and also the sanitation system, the connection of pipes, the built environment, for example, the streets. So there are a lot of different kind of components that come together in a very, small area, for example. And what urban living labs or these kind of platforms, urban experiments, let's put it this way, urban experiments that enables us to think about, how we can sit at the same table when it comes to a problem like water, cleansing the area, water sanitation. So because we need to really kind of act all together. So that's why this kind of co-creation, for example, participation concept is very important, because it is actually a topic that engineers, let's say architects, planners, biologists, because also, we are talking about the quality of the water, different disciplines, and also residents, because there's also, you can make the area great, but also you need to also think about also behavioral change. I don't know how to kind of behavioral change. I don't know if it's clear. So you really need to also think about, you don't need to, for example, throw your waste into creek, for example, or maybe think about, providing some educational programs in the area. So it is really actually quite a wide problem that, a lot of people need to come and sit at the same table and discuss and, see the bigger picture. I think that's the kind of starting point. And these urban experiments, they are maybe a good way to kind of start outside the box. Let's put it that way. Yeah. In the Netherlands now, they can actually recycle the grey water, which is the sewage, 100%, almost 100%. So, which is great. And they actually argue that they can also make it drinkable. But of course, I'm not sure, if this is, if they argue that, they can make the contaminated water drinkable with the new technologies that they provide. And in this, for example, case, also, I think it is possible to really, clean the water and make it reuse the water, even if it's not for drinking, for different purposes, for example, for showering, maybe washing hands, things like that. So it can be recycled in different ways, maybe. Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to know if you think that this methodology is, if we can use it in poor communities or in different kinds of communities, different realities from Netherlands, because I think here in Brazil we have a large experience with participative budget or planning, but in different ways. I think it's always a challenge when putting so many people and interests together and finding a solution. I think maybe the scale is really different. And I was thinking about how in our communities and periphery, this that you saw today, could see in our tour, because we have so basic needs, and how could we discuss these solutions with people that don't have, for example, clean water to drink or food, and so I would, and another question would be the budget. Where does it come from to construct, to build these communities, that these cases? I'd like to know if it's private support, and I was thinking also to discuss with this population, maybe with so many needs, basic needs, how do people could be prepared, maybe education, or maybe if we could have maybe a technical knowledge education first to be able to really discuss solution with these people. What do you think about that?
Thank you for the questions. So the first question, yes, so these cases, they were from Amsterdam, and they were cases that I also studied. But more and more also we see the application of urban living labs in different contexts. For example, one of my PhD students, well, I'm supervising him as an external PhD student. He's in Brazil, and he is right now as part of this network, Urban Living Lab network in Latin America. So the idea is really kind of look beyond Europe, and also I think also very excited about this thing, because of course the problems that you face are very different, and in fact, you know, the problems and also the solutions you will find, they will be even more valuable for Europeans, actually. So it's, you know, the learning from you, actually, not, you know, you learning from us. But I think for me, it's more important to learn from you. And so this, I think, becoming kind of like a mainstream, this idea, urban living lab, and how you can apply it in different countries, different, you know, continents even. But also, I have another PhD student. She's from Chile, and she's Chilean. And then they are also doing projects on co-creation, for example, participation of people towards the creation of public space in Santiago. And they are also using this kind of, not direct urban living lab kind of concept, but, you know, similar ideas where people are, you know, taking part, ownership, and also it's really about not the end product, but it's about the process, you know, the kind of emphasis with that. So I think there are kind of more examples emerging in Latin America. In terms of funding, in the Netherlands, most of the time it is led by entrepreneurs, so private, but then it is supported by the municipality, and municipality supported these ideas because it also ticks their boxes, because it also, you know, ticks their kind of environmental ambitions, you know, sustainability kind of ambitions, because, you know, all the cities, they want to be 100% sustainable in 2050, you know, all these kind of, you know, big promises. So, and then when you go to the municipality saying that I have this idea, I want to make my building 100% sustainable, and they will say, of course, this is what we want as well. So they also support, in some cases, providing subsidies, etc. So I think the funding is really private and public, but finding the right people and the right balance, that's important. And the last question was, oh yes, yeah. And that's, I think that is maybe also really important. I think, you know, really important, because yesterday, for example, in the workshop, you know, we talked about circular economy, for example. And then one of the, I think, things about these new ideas is that you really need to kind of teach these basics at school. Like, you know, if you want to, for example, talk about circularity or, you know, co-creation, participation, you know, you really need to kind of give these ideas, explain these things in the school. So it starts from there. And then at home, you know, you go and, like, you know, if you're recycling, you kind of teach your kids, you know, this is paper, this is glass, this is, you know, so it's also part of, I think, your home arrangement, that, you know, it's also kind of your home arrangement that, you know, you provide. And then from there, really kind of showing people how it works, and, you know, maybe giving some other examples, saying that, you know, oh, in Sao Paulo, there was this project, it was successful. maybe it works also in Rio de Janeiro. And then, because if one project is successful, the other city, they will be interested because it's new. But when something is new, you're not maybe very sure. But then when you test it and it works out, then you are sure. And then, you want to kind of replicate it in another city, another context. And I think it evolves like that. Yeah. Does that answer your questions? Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, just one comment about this developing the question that Ana Paula proposed in the beginning. The question Renata proposed in the beginning, or Ana Paula, about these different concepts of the same movement towards bottom-up or dialogue, a collaboration between society, different sectors, communities, with researchers, engineers, social science actors, and so on. So I want to, I see I'm seeing since many years different formulation of this kind of cooperation came from different countries or regions of the world, attached to programs, or in some case funding programs, as World Bank or research funding agencies from Netherlands or UK or USA or so. It's quite difficult for us, especially in this moment when we don't have almost nothing of funding for this kind of research, almost, because we are funded by McKinsey and CNPq, it's precisely this moment, but this is quite difficult to obtain. Just to make a equal relation with these international agencies of research, as we these agencies doesn't dialogue among them. So you have, sometimes it seems that we must fix in one formula with some concept, some specific bibliography for, but if you go to UK, it's the same thing, but we have to another. So how as you are from Turkey, and now you are since a long time in Netherlands work. How do you see a little bit from abroad this situation?
No, that's a very, I think, triggering remark, because I'm also, to be honest, very critical about these international funding agencies, because also when I was, well, 3 years ago, I also went to Ghana. We were commissioned to do some work from the World Bank, and then you know, so it is interesting, really, because you know, it's just a question of whether the funding really kind of trickles down to the people that are in need, and then at the end, whether kind of it is about pointing your finger on the community, saying we did what, you know, we did our best, but it was your fault at the end, huh? So that in that case, I think I'm also very critical about certain things. I think you understand what I mean. And then, you know, blaming, you know, the community if something doesn't work. So, but at the same time, these are opportunities. So I don't think we should kind of think about these are bad, you know, we should not accept these things, but it's also good to think how we can transform the society, going back to this kind of learning loops, the triple learning. So how we can maybe change the ecosystem, how we can really kind of empower the community. Maybe these are really big words, you know, but at the same time, it's about the process rather than the product. So for me, also as a citizen of a developing country, it is really about the process. It's really about establishing trust in the community, establishing trust amongst different stakeholders. So because when you establish this kind of trust between universities, you know, we went to the area today, for example, they know Anna, and then so they trust us, you, and then so it's really about making connections and that, not, you know, saying that in, let's say, 5 years we will reach, you know, 100% recycled, you know, whatever sustainability indicator, for example. So that's why I'm always a bit like critical, but at the same time, you know, we can actually do something about it. So it's not neither nor. So it's like thinking about how we can actually use it as part of the process and also capacity building in a way.
Okay, first, thank you so much for your talk, Professor. You spoke about authenticity, and I would like to ask you about it. Well, inside the methodology of urban living labs, is there a concern about the identity of the cities? How, or are there some tools that you place to keep the authenticity? And because hence we are facing like, how can I say, hence we are facing globalization like bigger than ever. I think it's important with our projects to keep the authenticity and the identity of the cities. So is there this concern inside the methodology of urban living labs?
That is a very good point. I would like to say yes, but for my experience, I haven't seen that, because most of the time urban living labs, what I have seen, they are targeting, let's say, indicators in relation to environment, for example, technology, innovation, and there's less talk on culture, identity, heritage. But I think it is, you know, it's a really important conversation because, you know, we went to, for example, this area today, and then, you know, the park, I can't remember that. Yeah, Sika. And then, you know, we heard a lot of interesting stories about the park and the history, and also the cultures, and you know, these discussions I think really important when it comes to bringing in different ideas, different knowledges. But so far, maybe because urban living labs are more associated with kind of climate change adaptation and future cities, there are maybe less emphasis on identity and culture, but more on technology and also recycling and water management and these kind of things. But I think it's a really nice angle to think about this. Yeah.
Based project, but since we have different identities and ways of thinking, so I think it's important always to
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I completely agree. And that's why I'm also saying the learning is reciprocal. So, it's also, I think people can, in Europe, people can, learn a lot also from, Latin America and also developing countries. Yeah.
Vamos fazer só se for uma pergunta breve para podermos encerrar, porque já estamos no nosso horário. Okay. He's still curious about to know where the drinkable water comes from to Amsterdam, where the water is storage and drive to the city. The captation of the water, where it comes from.
So there are different systems. So one of them is this recycling system that provides the water, cleanses the waters. There are pumps, water pumps. There are some storage units, for example, that kind of keeps the water and it circulates the water. In Bergsloterham, I think they have these kind of huge water tank. That kind of stores the water and then distributes the water. In general, in the city, the water comes from different sources. So again, they recycle the water from the rivers. In the Netherlands, they don't have any problems with water. Huh? So the whole country, I mean, 75% of the country is under the water anyway, so technically, and it rains a lot, so they don't have any problems in the Netherlands with the waters. So there's a lot of water, abundance of water, and so in some cases it is restored, recycled, and yeah. In Amsterdam metropolitan area, yes. In Amsterdam metropolitan area, the water is consumed and then recycled in the same boundary.
Tudo bem? Deu para... É diferente, né? A gente tem esse problema de captação tão longe da água, né? Pensar uma região metropolitana que se abastece pelo mesmo espaço. Bacana. Ok, thank you very much, Aksel. Muito obrigada pela audiência de todos. And thank you very much, Aksel. What a great pleasure to have you here. And I hope it is the first time of a lot of fun.
Agradecer a presença de todos e todas, lembrando que amanhã a nossa visita